Spoken there. I haven't thought about flying for a long time. I haven't dreamed of that moment when I was alone above the clouds for a long time. I haven't dreamed of waking up in a room surrounded in blue and green grass for more years than I could dream of remembering. I haven't walked back into the past or scratched on the doors of my origins, where it all came from, since I held up that cape for the last time.
Return to Cape Town 10th Year Anniversary Edition is a revised version of Andy N's first poetry book. The book can be purchased from Amazon and it contains numerous additional material.
Spoken Label. Hi, it's Andy N from Spoken Label. Thank you today for streaming or downloading another episode of Spoken Label. Spoken Label was originally set up on beginning of 2016 and as of speaking has currently nearly 300 sessions. The full archive is available on Spoken Label bandcamp.com. Although it is available for free for stream and download if you wish, I am always grateful for any sort of kind of donation to enable me to keep the running costs of this podcast going. And enjoy. Take care. Bye bye. Spoken Label. Hi guys, Andy N, Spoken Label, back in the house. Nearly got caught out there by the automatic voice and on Zoom. So anyway, I've got a fantastic bloke with me today. And it's the first time I've actually met this guy on Zoom, but we've been chatting away for ages on Facebook. And I've already talked fairly recently to his comrade in arms that runs a beehive with him. And the gentleman I've got him today is Nick Lovell. Okay, Nick, tell everybody about yourself and where all your creativity came from, mate. And let's start from there.
Fair enough. I've always enjoyed poetry. Even back when I was at school, I'd occasionally try my hand at scribing some verse, and then throughout my teenage and adolescent years, again, the standard teenage poetry when hearts were broken and things like that. But thankfully, most of that ended up in the bin. After that, things like careers and family and jobs and work got in the way. And then about 9 years ago now, my son was at school. They had a poet visiting, and I got a phone call saying he'd missed his bus because he'd stayed late to chat to this poet, and could I come and pick him up? So I picked him up, and all the way home we talked about this poet, how fantastic he was. And it's Ash Dickinson who was visiting the school.
Oh, I've met Ash. I've met him. Yeah.
Lovely guy.
Really nice bloke, yeah.
And he asked, it's all I've had Ash on Facebook. And I was like, well, you're only 13, so you can add him. But if I send him a friend request and he turns it down, then you're taking him off your friends list because that'll be a bit of a red flag. Yeah, just standard. Your kid's young and online. You've got to just be a bit aware. So my wife added him as a friend. I added him as a friend. Absolutely no problems. Then we saw he was appearing in Cheltenham. And so Michelle and I went along to see him. We got chatting with him, with Fergus McGonagall afterwards. And in the chat, it came up that I'd occasionally written poems and written little verses in cards and that. And I got challenged to enter the Swindon Poetry Slam. Sort of challenged, dared almost. And the wife was like, yes, go on, you should do it. And I kind of been led to believe it'd probably be 5 or 10 local blokes. The boy stood on the burning deck, his feet were full of blisters, his trousers burnt right round the back, so he had to wear his sister type thing. So I had a chat with Marcus Moore, absolutely lovely guy, probably the reason why I didn't bail out before the slam. Looked up performance poetry online. I encountered some of the more extreme American performance poetry at first and was like, what the heck is this? Then found some of the English performance poets, Elvis McGonagall, more Ash Dickinson, Fergus McGonagall, more poets like that. I thought, I think I probably can do this. Wrote 4 or 5 poems, picked the best 3 and rocked up to the poetry slam and where did I come again? Last, that's right, yes.
Oh, I've done that before now.
But 1 point behind Joe Bell.
Bloody hell.
14th, and I thought, she's the Canal Poet Laureate, and this is my first ever time reading poems on stage. Oh, by the way, kids, don't do it that way. Slams are not the best way to break your poetry virginity. Honestly,
No, don't recommend it. Awful experiences they have, mate. I don't mind watching them, but I've seen, and I agree with totally Nick on that, I've seen a couple of young poets going there now, and they've gone down that badly, and I thought they were good writers.
Yeah.
They put them right off. It's too competitive, mate, to be honest with you.
The thing about slams is it's not about the best poetry at all. It's about what tickles the judges on the night. And the judges might sometimes be from the poetry community. Other times they might be civic dignitaries. Other times it might be random Joes out of the audience that have never listened to a poem critically before in their lives. You just don't know. And I could have come out of there absolutely crestfallen, destroyed. As it was, several of the poets, Dave Viney, Mab Jones, came up afterwards and was saying, "Oh, really, really enjoyed your poem. Shame you came last, but how long have you been writing? Not heard of you before." And I was like, "About 2 weeks." How many times have you performed before? Never. And they were like, "Well, if that's your first ever performance, seriously, keep with it. Here are some open mic nights you might want to come along to." And I was hooked. So yeah, it's Ash Dickinson's fault, really.
Now, obviously, everyone knows you. Your main comrade in beehive is Clive Osman. Now, how did you and Clive meet?
Now that's a convoluted story and a half. I met a friend of Clive's at the Worcester Poetry Slam about 6 or 7 years ago. I met him and got chatting to him purely because he totally misunderstood what was going on. Someone mistook him for one of the performing poets and asked him for a bio. So he wrote his name and a little bio down, and then they announced him as one of the competing poets. And he turned around to me, he's like, "Is that you they're talking? Have they got me confused with you?" I'm like, "No, you gave them a bio. I thought you were a poet as well." He's like, "I've never written a bloody poem in my life." And so once confusion was sorted out, we sort of had a pint and a chat together, and he said, he knew a poet in Swindon that was looking to maybe get to know other poets around the area, and would it be all right if he gave this poet me details on my Facebook and that. And I got a friend request from Clive the next day, and we got chatting. And I was going to an open mic down in Bristol that was being run by Matt Duggan. I think it was called an evening of spoken indulgence. And Clive asked Clive if fancy coming along. He's like, "Well, I've never ever read before." And I was like, "Really, really friendly, really, really welcoming. Just bring it along. You'll have a great time." And he went down, and he went down with me to Bristol, and he read his first ever poem, and it was a typical first ever poetry reading. He was terrified. He was vibrating, so he was shaking so much I couldn't figure out how he could read what was on the paper until I realised the paper was shaking at the same frequency he was, so it probably looked rock solid. But he was visibly nervous, visibly petrified. But he got up there, went through, got his round of applause, sat back down, and was hooked. He was absolutely hooked from that moment on. I've watched him develop his serious poetry. He's written on some very serious subjects and subjects very dear to him. Domestic abuse towards men, the Guildford and Birmingham bombings. He's also written some light-hearted comedy poems, such as his IKEA poem, his A to Z of Animals, which is absolutely bloody brilliant alliteration.
Oh, it's well worth hearing that piece, because he did an extract of that for Spoken Level when I had him on a couple months ago, and I hadn't heard it before, Nick, and it creased me big style.
Yeah, I absolutely, he's been absolutely brilliant, and he's absolutely fearless when it comes to experimenting. I'm far more cautious and It's the only time I'll ever use this word to describe me, but far more conservative in how I how I throw my poetry out there. If I'm not sure about something, it might be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years that I'll be sitting there looking at it thinking, And it's usually if I'm like, oh God, I can't remember what I performed at an open mic last time. What shall I do? Oh, I'll try that one and see how it goes. And I'm usually quite surprised it'll go down quite well. But Clive, he will write the most out there performance pieces that you can imagine. He started off, he wrote a couple of poems as God, and would appear on stage complete in white robe and big long artificial beard as God, which they could divide the audience sometimes at some nights. Some of the more genteel, perhaps church-going members of the audience were not hugely impressed, but the majority of the audience would laugh. And he has just become more and more experimental. He's almost bordering on is it Dadaism?
Yeah, I think it's Dadaism. Yeah, I know what you mean. That, yeah.
Surreal barely describes it. And when he started performing as the Queen, the first poem he sent through by the Queen, he said, "What do you think of this? It's something I'm thinking about doing. I'm going to start performing as the Queen." And I was like, "Are you sure?" And I read it through, and I was like, "I don't know if this is going to work, mate. It's going to go one or two ways. It's either going to be a hit or it's going to be a disaster." He was like, "What the hell? Let's give it a try." And he has knocked it out of the park.
He has. And if anyone's wondering, obviously, we need to clarify. We mean the Queen. Yes, we mean that Queen. Because I've seen him do that set about 3 times now.
Yes, the voice, I think, is the crowning glory. Because you can hear as the set goes on, it starts to become a little bit more difficult to maintain that voice. And I find it quite amusing when I'm sitting there thinking, no, you need to hurry up now, mate. It's starting to squeak a bit.
I know his voice is starting to go after a while. I feel sorry for him. So now, obviously, after that, then you two obviously formed beehive, didn't you? So, what made you want to set your own night up then?
It was, to be honest, there was a lack of a performance space in Swindon for performance poetry. There is Swindon Poetry, which at the time was going under the name of Bluegate Poets, which was rather more for the page vibe and what some people might regard as proper poetry. I don't differentiate. To me, poetry is poetry. I don't care if you're reading something, Homer's Iliad, if you're reading John Cooper Clarke's Beasley Street. It's poetry. It's all the same to me. There are people who do want to try and divide the poetry world into page poetry and performance poetry and sort of look at them differently, but I don't like to do that. Clive and I went along to Bluegate Poets a couple of times. Everyone was very polite, everyone was very welcoming, but we just didn't feel our poetry fitted in there. Not through anything they did, but just because it was so different. I mean, if you could imagine, say, Clive turning up doing his Queen performance in the middle of the proms, it was that kind of effect. So we thought we really need something for poets around Swindon. Let's set a night up and see how it goes. We had no real solid ideas formed. We discussed it a couple of times. And we're looking to move forward. But then on the run up to Clive's birthday, one of his friends, oddly enough, the same guy I met in Worcester, set up an afternoon in Swindon in a pub on Clive's birthday so that he could have a poetry event, and we called it Sunday Afternoon Clive. And it was an absolute smash. The Sunday regulars coming into the pub were a bit blown away by it. We got 6 poets, 3 local poets, 3 from a bit further afield to come along and perform. It was hosted by Angie Belcher and Chloe Jacquet. And the pub landlord was so impressed, he said, guys, that was fantastic. Would you be interested in maybe doing something quite regular if we've got a free slot each month? And as Clive and I were already talking about setting up a night, it seemed the perfect opportunity to put the plans into action. So we went from there. And that was just under 4 years ago now.
Brilliant.
Just under 5 years ago.
I know you do. It's like the way everything's gone over the past year, because like it's had 40. I've been really covering that speakeasy now for what 4.5 years ourselves. But you're knocking off almost a year and a half, aren't you? Really, because of the way everything's gone. So yeah, completely. Now, obviously, with yourself, then how have you found? How has your writing developed over time? Then, do you think your writing has changed a lot since you started hosting the night together, you two?
My writing at the moment has changed, as in it's dried up a lot. I don't write half as prolifically as I used to. It used to be virtually every week I'd write a poem and I'd think, yes, no, I'm happy with that, and throw it on out there. Whereas nowadays, I think this year since January, I've maybe written 4 poems that I'm happy with. I've become a lot more critical of myself. Poems that I would have performed a couple of years back, I tend to get halfway through and think, this isn't saying what I want it to say, or it's not saying it how I want to say it. And whereas before I would have just let it flow on and done the poem anyway, nowadays I tend to be much more likely to put that onto the back burner and think, right, let's stop and think where, in some cases, just go through it, pick the couple of phrases that I think are any good or any merit, and just and just bin the whole lot, because I have become a lot more critical of myself.
I think it's a natural. Sorry, mate. Yeah, I think it's a natural progression as a writer. Because I know what you mean that. Because I found myself when I was starting getting performance poetry a few years before you, I used to throw poems out on a day-by-day basis and to go up and read them. And I think the more you think about it, the older you get. It's not a case of you're more cautious what you share. You're paying more attention to what you're doing, basically. And I think lockdown has slowed people down a lot anyway. So, and I think when the scene picks up again, we'll see how it goes. I think you'll probably find your writing will probably pick up again, probably.
I would think so. I'd think very likely. I mean, I certainly have developed in the subjects that I cover. I used to look very much at things that related to myself, whereas nowadays I'll maybe be trying to look at things from someone else's point of view, even if it's not necessarily the popular point of view. Sadly, when I was younger, when I grew up in East London in the 70s, I grew up around a lot of racism. And I abhor racism. But having grown up around it, I think the people that just will condemn someone who says or does something that's perceived as racist totally out of hand, and that's it, they must be a Nazi, they're perhaps missing out on context on that person's upbringing. In the same way as if someone's brought up in an abusive household, they're likely to be abusive.
Yeah,
if someone's
completely.
Brought up surrounded by racists and indoctrinated by racists, then they've been radicalized every bit as much. And I do not excuse racism in any way, but sometimes you have to have a look and say, well, did that person ever have a choice? They're 15 years. I've seen a video of a 15-year-old child coming out with horrific racist abuse with his mum and dad behind him, sort of egging him on. And he's 15 years old. He's been raised by a pair of racists whose whole social network will be nothing but racists, because they do live in an almost exclusive bubble a lot of the time. And as such, if a 15-year-old has been indoctrinated in any other direction, you would hope there'd be some hope of what's the word I'm looking for? A recovery of bringing them back into to have a sensible view of the world. I just think that it's very easy for people to condemn and write off an absolute. And on the flip side, you've then got a lot of people, oddly enough, the racists, saying exactly the same thing about people like Shamima Begum. You know, they're she had her chance. She chose. She was 15 years old. The government of this country has managed to forgive all those involved in the troubles in Ireland, in the IRA, in the unionist paramilitaries, who committed some quite horrific crimes. But that has been, they've managed to move on from there as part of the peace process. Yet a girl who was 15 years old when she made a bad decision is still denied the ability to come back into the UK. It's like two sides of the same coin. It's the extremism on the sort of the racist extremism at either end of the scale doesn't make sense to me. I just can't get my head around any extremism. And so some of my poems I have tried writing. So most of them haven't been put out, but I have tried writing and sort of trying to look at the cause, you know, what causes people to think like that. Why? And having been brought up around racism when I was young, I've kind of got an inside picture on some of it, unfortunately.
Over lockdown itself, and like all nights are pretty well survived now, they've all gone on to Zoom mostly. How has your experience been on Zoom for you and Clive? Running all Beehive? Because I've been to two of them to watch, and I know you're telling me before, your crowd has gone straight up on it.
Yes. The experience of Beehive on Zoom has been absolutely spectacular, and I must point the credit in the direction of Clive Osman for this, because he has been an absolute trooper. I don't enjoy performing on Zoom a huge amount, purely because it takes me back to when I first started writing poetry and when I first started doing poetry slams, sitting in front of my webcam, just repeating the poetry again and again to myself to practice and get it right, and watch the video and then do it again and get it right. And that really put me off performing to my computer in my kitchen. So I'm not a massive fan of performing online. I miss the buzz of the audience, that feeling. I can tell when when I'm in a room with an audience how a poem is going, and almost be thinking, right, this one's going down really well, which probably means my next poem might not. So let's see how that goes. And then you can almost play with the set as you go along and think, right, no, they didn't like that one, so I'll drop that one out. And I find there's not that same feedback with the audience. There is usually, you know, people are very great in the chat, but there's just a buzz in a live performance that I really feel that I miss on online. But Beehive online is something that just blows my mind every time. Our audience has expanded. We've gone from being an open mic night with maybe 20 or 30 people coming along in a sleepy little southwest town to having performers coming from America, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Ireland, Northern Ireland, Europe, literally worldwide, and poets that we would never, ever have been able to see perform at Beehive without the most massive stroke of luck. You know, they'd need to come to visit Swindon and just happen to hear there was a poetry open. Oh, I'll take that in. It wasn't going to happen. But We've met poets like Kathy Carson, who is pound for pound, I think, the most exciting poet to come out of lockdown for me. I've yet to see her perform a poem that hasn't left me moved to my very core. Then you've got Special K from America. So powerful, so exciting to watch. And these are poets I would never have heard of even without the pandemic. So it's been a horrific experience for everyone, but there have been a few small good things to come out of it. And I think the way poetry in general has expanded on Zoom, and from a personal point of view, the way Beehive has gone from a small, as I said, a small local open mic event to one that people in other countries look forward to attending each month has been mind-blowing. And the quality, I really can't stress this. I mean, Clive and I are almost embarrassed sometimes doing our poetry because it's just out of place amongst the quality of the poetry on the open mic, let alone some of the headliners we've had.
Yeah, of course. No, you do. I found that myself because the night, obviously, how we run speakeasies, we've tried to keep it more local, but we've had quite a bit coming from all over the country ourselves, and sometimes beyond that. And it's brilliant because it lets you get a different feel for people, doesn't it? Different sort of people's writing, and it's kind of open. I think in some ways it's opened the world up. Possibly it's going to bring us all closer together as a poetry community around the world now. I reckon the way it's going.
Very much so. Well, Clive has already got his first international booking.
I saw that. Yeah, he's going to Nashville next year. Oh, fantastic.
Going to perform poetry in Nashville next year, and possibly taking a couple of other towns while he's there that have got open mic nights. So, yeah, it's done exactly that. It has opened the world up much, much more. Now, there are some international poetry events around the world, but they tend to be quite hard to get to for your average Joe. Whereas Zoom now, something I think is going to happen is that Zoom is going to stay in people's lives even after lockdown's gone, once live events are back. I know beehive, at beehive, we are looking to either combine our live event with our Zoom event through some dexterous use of technology and cabling and speakers. If that doesn't work, we will still be running an beehive online alongside as a companion event to our beehive live event, and we are planning to continue now running the beehive UK online slam championship, so that people anywhere in the UK can actually perform without having to travel to London or Birmingham, because slams don't pay expenses. You don't get paid the expenses or overnight stays if you go to take part in a slam. It's you going to perform.
Yeah.
So it makes it very difficult. I know of performers that have had to drop out of the Hammer and Tongue UK Slam Championships because they just couldn't afford to get there.
Before that now as well, yeah. It's expensive. It adds up a lot of the time.
Well, I mean, think a two night stay in London over a weekend, train travel down there. You're not getting much change out of £400.
No, won't be. Yeah, like I said, I've done it before now. Amanda won us concert tickets the year before last to go down and see Snow Patrol actually at the London MBN or London, whatever you call it, right? And I remember it because she had the prize itself got us a night at the Caledonian Hotel around the corner from it, and it was had been £200 a night, and then you work out yourself what you all had. It's just money. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of years back, I was invited to take part, and because my family lived in London, it was nice and easy. I went down, stayed with my sister, parked the car up, and the wife drove me up, dropped me off at the Albert Hall. Saved a fortune that way. But if I'd needed to find somewhere to stay overnight or something like that, I couldn't have afforded to have done that weekend.
Yeah.
With Zoom, if you've got an internet connection that's relatively reliable, we just, we want people to be able to take part if they're on the Isle of Man, if they're in Northern Ireland, if they're anywhere within the UK. And yes, I know technically the Isle of Man is not quite the UK, but as it's within the geographical area, we made the decision that we would count the Isle of Man as part of the UK for the slam. But it opens up the slam scene to people that, as I said, might not have been able to get around. So, to make it a genuinely inclusive slam that covers everyone, anyone in the UK can enter.
Yeah. Now, you're telling me before, obviously, Nick, about these more possible future plans for obviously at beehive. Tell us about that, what you're looking at doing. I think this is quite interesting. It's worth you repeating this, what you told me before off mic. We've
been looking at the technical difficulties involved in using a large screen inside the pub, on which the Zoom audience would appear. A laptop to control Zoom, a webcam to allow the Zoom audience to see any live performances from the poets, and an audio feed from the and a speaker feed from the laptop, so that for interaction with the Zoom audience, that will come via the amplifier, and then the webcam and the speaker and the microphone will allow them to obviously hear and see the live performers, and then any Zoom performers will appear on the big screen, spotlighted, and the audio will be channeled out a second speaker that will be dedicated for the Zoom audience, so that when they're applauding, that can be heard, and when a Zoom performer is performing, they'll be appearing effectively in the pub. That's the hope.
Yeah, I like. Well, everyone wonders of that word, hope.
Yeah.
To quote Morgan Freeman in The Shawshank Redemption, hope is a good thing. That's all I'm going to say there.
To quote the great Sir Terry Pratchett, there's something about the word reckon that is a little worrying to the ear. You kind of want something a little bit more precise than, I reckon it'll work.
Yeah,
but I reckon it'll work.
No, definitely, mate. So now, obviously, can you reveal anything about possible future guests yet at Old Beehive? What guests you got coming up?
You're going to have to bear with me for 1 second, because I've got a memory like a sieve and I can just about remember my own name. But I can, in just 1 moment, as soon as I can find Clive's feed. But we are hoping to have some big names appearing. Names we've had, some of the large names we've had over the past couple of months. We started the year with Elvis McGonigal, who was absolutely incredible. He simply blew everyone away, and the year got off to a huge bang. Now, bear with me 1 second. Yep, our next Beehive, which is on 16th of July, is going to be headlined by Gemma Hathaway, who's the Bristol Hammer and Tongue champion and came second in the Beehive UK Online Slam Championship last year. So we're looking forward to that. We are still considering our next headliners for the rest of the year, purely because we have so many names that it's not that we're struggling to find headliners, it's that we're struggling to decide which headliner to put on in which order. It's we have been absolutely blessed with the talent that we've found over the past year and a half on Zoom, and at the moment things are a little up in the air as to when we're going to go back live. But we're hoping to have Chloe Jacquet headlining in the next couple of months.
I've just done a session with Chloe fairly recently, and that'll be going up. Would have gone up a couple of weeks for this one actually, yeah. And she was fantastic. That was Clive. Clive recommended her to me straight away. He did.
Chloe is one of my favourite people in the poetry.
Lovely lady, truly lovely lady. Yeah,
she's an amazing poet. We used to co-host the Gloucester Gorilla Slam together. And I absolutely look forward to co-hosting with Chloe, because there's just a buzz and a spark there that really, really put the both of us on the top of our game. As I used to say, she used to represent the glitz and glamour of poetry, and I was there for the nitty-gritty realism. But yeah, and as I said, she is such an accomplished poet. Anyone who's not seen the video of her poem, The Dealer, please look it up. It's on YouTube. Chloe Jacquet, The Dealer. It is an absolutely fantastic poem and an absolutely fantastic film representation of it.
She did a version of that on my session as well. Absolutely incredible. Right, Nick. Okay, what will I do? That's probably good time to conclude now. So, a couple of quick questions to finish off with, mate.
Yes.
If people want to find out more about you, where are the best going?
Best place to find me is on Facebook. I'm still a bit old school. I do have a Twitter that I probably tweet maybe once a month, so not an ideal place to follow me. Facebook, I post several times a day.
Brilliant. And if people want to find out more about old Beehive, where are the best going?
Again, the Beehive Facebook page tends to be our primary point of reference. Clive and I are setting up an Instagram as well to accompany that, because that seems to be where a lot of people are finding their information nowadays. So that'd be www.facebook.com/Beehive. Will take you straight there. 3 O's and a H.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's all my questions for this part. So, hang on. Have you got something still you to say there, mate?
Before we go, we do also have a YouTube channel. So if you search for us on YouTube, again, Beehive, OOOH Beehive, that will take you to us. We try and put up various headline sets on there, the finalists from any of our slams that we've had, and again, any performances we see that just leave us blown away, we tend to throw them up there.
Brilliant. Okay, Nick, that's perfect. Perfect way to finish off me. That right. We'll let you go and get a few poems ready for us, mate. And hang around. I love Nick's work. He's a gentleman, cracks me up. I wouldn't say almost as much as Clive. He does crack me up as much as Clive Osmond does in a completely different way.
I will do my best.
Right. See you all in a minute, guys. Thanks again, Nick.
Spoken, mate.
Hi, guys. Okie dokie. Still here with Nick. Straight over to you, mate. Go for it. You've got 3 poems for us and a cover.
Yes. My first poem, probably as good a way to introduce me as any. I used to work as a Greyhound commentator, and despite my regular requests, they wouldn't let me do the commentaries in the form of little poems. So I came home one day and flipped it on its head and did a poem in the form of a Greyhound commentary. It's called The Race of His Life, and it goes like this. Ladies and gentlemen, there is now 1 minute's betting remaining until the race of his life. The hare is running, the hare is approaching the traps, and snap, the hare is caught in a trap, just like Elvis Presley. Now, back to the race. And they're off. It's bewildered Nick, making all the running as they head towards the first bend of many. This youngster is making ground against potty training, preschool, infancy, and the introduction to the basics of capitalism through playground economics. A little bumping for masturbation, self-loathing and puberty as they go through the second bend, but it's bewildered Nick, still tight on the rails as they head onto the back straight, leading by a length from immaturity with insecurity, bad decisions, unemployment and an unsuitable girlfriend all gaining on him. Bewildered Nick still leading by some good head from a girl he met in a nightclub and a kicking from her boyfriend half an hour later, closely followed by sympathy, a series of dates, cohabitation and an unexpected wedding. As they go into the third bend, it's bewildered Nick losing ground now to 2 kids, a mortgage, depression, disaffection with his job and a nagging fear of failure. It's bewildered Nick still leading by a neck from redundancy with midlife crisis making a move and depression still in and out of the pack as they go into the 4th and final bend. Middle age falling away to be passed by, you're an old bastard now. Nostalgia, confusion and minor regrets also coming into the running as they race down the home straight towards the finish. It's bewildered Nick from grandchildren with not enough exercise, too many fags, and both your parents died from cancer, you stupid bastard. As they hurtle towards the line, retirement, boredom and longing for release now fighting for position with mild incontinence and unusual smells. But bewildered Nick still clinging on to the lead with death close behind as they race the last couple of metres towards the line. It's bewildered Nick from death. Bewildered Nick from death, and it's bewildered Nick and death neck and neck as they cross the line for a photo finish. A photo finish there between bewildered Nick and death. And we have the result of the photo finish. The winner is death, ladies and gentlemen. Death wins by 1 length. Death always wins by exactly 1 length. Thank you.
I heard you do that one at last time I saw you read, actually. I can't remember. It wasn't. I thought it was fantastic. I'm glad you started off with that one, mate. It's a great start, that one.
That one's always good fun. When I wrote it, it's one of those ones you sit there and you think, it's either going to work or it's not. And touch wood, it has so far. My second one is a bit more serious. When I left school, I went straight into the army and served in there for a while. and that affected me a lot more deeply than I actually realised at the time, like so many soldiers. But I came out of the army with a real interest in military history, not just in sort of the jingoistic side of it, but into what the actuality of it was, etc. And the sad fact is, a lot of the battles that we celebrate as victories for the British Army, they weren't. We got our backsides kicked. This next poem was written after reading the book A Bridge Too Far about the attacks on Arnhem, which several regiments carry as their battle honours, but where we lost. And I read a paragraph in the book and it just sat in the back of my head for about 3 months, and then just said, tell my story. And it fell out onto the page, and yeah, this is called Market Garden. I don't think I'm going to make it. Would you stay and hold my hand? It wasn't meant to end this way. I'd always planned to live to be 100, raise a family, build a home. Now those dreams, like me, lie ruined, and I don't want to die alone. The lads and me were also keen to come and do our bit, thought we'd all return as heroes like anyone would give a shit. But one by one they've been gunned down, none spared till now but me. Their blood and guts stung fields from hell to eternity. Are you still there, mate? It's awfully dark. I thought it was only noon. I'm sorry to have kept you here, but I'll be going soon. These guilty bullets burn inside like 1,000 angry bees. I can hardly feel your hand now, mate. Stay a little longer, please. It would have been my birthday next week. I'd have had a score of years and life beneath my belt, but then this fucking war took hold of us. It twisted things. It brought me here to die. It taught me how to follow fools and never question why. Thanks, mate, for your company, for staying by my side. I never thought I'd be this scared. I guess needs must conquer pride. Tell them it happened instantly. Don't tell them about the blood, not my gasping breath through gritted teeth, not my shit mixed in the mud. Don't tell them about my mangled leg nor the terror in my eyes. Don't tell the truth of how I died. Just pass on my goodbyes. Thousands died in Arnhem, blazing pit of 20 hells, where the devil danced the endless beat of 1,000,000 artillery shells, where I held a dying young man's hand till his final rattled gasp. Felt his hand clutch mine that one last time. Felt him shudder as he passed. Felt the anger, rage and sickness tear apart my tattered mind. Felt the helplessness and terror at the touch of graveyard lime and yew. His youthful face, now still, would live with me for all my time. And that's that one.
Wow, that's good. Just shows you everything. I think good writing, Nick. You can. That felt like two completely different writers, then.
Yeah,
and in a good way. In a good way.
Yeah, it's a sort of two extremes. A bit of humour, and let's see if we can jerk a tear out there somewhere.
You did with me there, mate. Completely fantastic.
My next poem is well, it's not my poem. It's actually one by Adrian Mitchell, who was an absolutely amazing performance poet, a great anti-war campaigner, a real humanitarian. He was most famous for a poem he wrote about Vietnam called To Whom It May Concern, which he performed at the Ginsberg Festival of Poetry at the Albert Hall in 1968, I think it was, and which has gone on to become a real anti-war standard. For those of you who have not heard that one, it's the one that starts off, the one that asks, tell me lies about Vietnam. I don't know if you've heard it, but it's well worth looking up. This is another of his poems, and I was absolutely entranced just by the title of the poem, which is Take stalk between teeth, pull stalk from blossom, throw blossom over arm towards enemy, lie flat, await explosion. What a great title. And that it goes like this. I staggered in the garage and handed them my heart. Can you overhaul it because the bloody thing won't start? They hammered it and sprayed it till it looked just like a toad. Told me that it shouldn't be allowed upon the road. They said that I should change it for a psychedelic dream. They asked, what do you call this aboriginal machine? I said, it's a rose, I suppose. A unicorn is bathing in the shallows of your eyes. You've got a mouth that's whispering between your thighs. You bring me foreign honeycomb and science fiction ties, and every time you touch me, you declare your surprise. Our language is a code that I haven't yet cracked, so I cannot be sure of your message for a fact, but it's a rose, I suppose. When they see us walking, they're puzzled what to say. We're so obvious in a mysterious way. Clouds that fly south when the wind blows east, hovercraft feet and faces all creased. We drew our wages in magical wine, and what our business is, well, that's harder to define, but it's a rose, I suppose. Tennyson's on television selling bad breath. Lyndon's in the pulpit and the sermon is death. Hitler's in the bunker playing nuclear chess. Judas got a column in the Sunday Express. Well, zombies are lurching all over this town. There's only one weapon seems to bring them all down, and it's a rose, I suppose. Thank you. And thank you to Adrian Mitchell, who all of his poems are incredible. Many of them are on YouTube. He's well worth looking up and listening to. He was one of the biggest regrets of my life is I didn't discover poetry until after he'd passed. So I never got to see him perform. But
I did that. I saw him live actually. Oh, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, jealous.
Well, I was very young, man. Yeah, I remember because I got taught him at school. I had quite a progressive teacher at school back in the 80s. Yeah, that's why.
Did you not hear? Adrian Mitchell actually decreed that his poems must not be used in any educational format after visiting a school and sitting down and taking a test paper, which included questions on his poetry, where they asked, what did the poet mean when he said this? And he wrote down exactly what he meant when he wrote it, and was marked wrong by the teacher. And after that, he said, no, that's it. You're not to use my poems in schools or in education anymore. I forbid it. It is not to happen. You don't know what you're doing with my work. And
I remember that. I didn't know that. I did not know that story. That's fantastic.
Yeah, he was an absolutely he was an absolutely amazing poet, and a lot of his poems are based around school and around the effects his education had on him, and what a negative experience it was for him. He was passionate about education. He was passionate about poetry being taught, but he would not let his poems be taught in the current educational situation. Which brings us to the last poem of mine, which I'm never sure whether it's a poem, a letter of complaint, a piece of spoken word, or a sad reflection on the advertising culture that we live in at the moment. It's called the Jinx effect, and some people who buy deodorant may recognise a certain product. Dear Sir / Madam / Miss / Ms, I'm writing to complain about either the veracity of your advertising campaigns or the quality of your range of underarm deodorant products available in my area. Since your range of products was released over 25 years ago, I've purchased 17,526 cans of the various aromas you offer, based upon your advertising campaigns indicating that I merely need to apply one small spray of any of the wide range of products to my body to precipitate a veritable storm of beautiful women filled with a desire as a result of sensing the aromatic bouquets that you have created and I have purchased. It is my sad duty to inform you that not one of the cans I've purchased over the 2.5 decades has functioned as advertised, and has not resulted in so much as a smile for any females at all, let alone the beautiful women depicted in your advertising campaigns. Not a bloody sausage. At first, I thought this lack of response from the opposite sex may have something to do with the amount applied. As a result, I've increased this amount to see if this has any effect. I currently apply approximately 1 can per day per armpit, and so far the only effects I've noticed have been a certain lightheadedness for about an hour or so after completing my toilet, and a mildly painful rash. After several more lonely years, I also considered the application methods of remote locations shown in your adverts, and have to report that having travelled to every beach currently reachable by car, rail, boat, plane, submarine and helicopter in the inhabited world, not a single girl approached me, unless you count the female lifeguard who interrupted my experiment on Bondi Beach to advise me that my interpretation of the ninja-like moves essayed by the male model whilst applying deodorant in one of your advertising commercials was disturbing people. I'm also disappointed to note the large wooden ark I've built in my back garden is yet to attract so much as one short, dark and ugly munter, let alone streams of beautiful blonde goddesses coming for me 2 by 2. Whilst it has gained me some attention, being named Noah on the front page of my local paper was not quite the result your adverts had led me to expect. Having noticed with interest your campaign intimating your products may be of assistance in locating hitherto undiscovered tribes of Amazonian beauties with a propensity to remove their underclothes to signify their approval of my choice of sachet, I've spent what free time I've had over the last 7 years, what with building a bloody ark and searching for that sodding beach, trekking across the world's last wildernesses, and as a result can advise you that despite attracting millions of biting insects, flies, spiders, scorpions, snakes, and one over-amorous brown bear, your various products fail to attract one single woman or even any married ones. Therefore, it was with relief that I viewed the adverts announcing the release of your His and Hers range of fragrances. This advert clearly demonstrates that these 2 new additions to your range are suitable for use in the urban environment, and thus I purchased a case of the His variety and applied 2 cans before leaving the house. Once I was able to stand and leave the house, I set off through the town centre, anticipating a wave of vehicular carnage, with swarms of female volleyball teams tearing themselves free from the apocalyptic wreckage of myriad team buses, all overwhelmed with desire for me. Sadly, the only vehicular mishap to occur as a result of my use of your product was due to the dizziness following my over-application. In my disoriented state, I staggered into the road and was struck by a lorry. Undeterred, I applied my reserve can to my body whilst in the ambulance, and now can happily report that at last, after 25 years, 17,526 cans of your product, thousands of miles of travel, hundreds of miles of trekking, countless insect, fly, spider, scorpion and snake bites, 1 ark, 1 bear mauling and 1 life-threatening road traffic accident, there's finally been a result. One of the nurses on duty in the intensive care unit has asked me for a date once my legs have healed and I can walk again. His name is Derek. Thank you very bloody much indeed. Thank you.
Excellent, Nick. Tremendous, mate. That's all I've got to say there, mate.
That's sort of a range of what I do and what I like.
Best way to be that, mate. When you do these sort of things, a good selection, and that's been tremendous, mate. So it's been a great session, Nick. I've really enjoyed this, mate. As all, I knew I would, mate, straight away, mate. So thank you very much, mate.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait until the world opens up again and I can get up to actually meet in person.
Yeah, if you and Clive want to come this way, mate, love to meet you, mate. No problem with that. I'd even have a glass of beer with you, and I don't drink nowadays, like I said, mate. You probably need a glass of beer after you met me, mate.
You'll need one after you've met me, definitely. And as Clive, the thing with Zoom is it just doesn't do him justice. It doesn't do him justice.
I can believe you, mate. I can believe you in that one. All right, mate. Listen, mate, we'll have to conclude here anyway. So look to get the time clock on this one and I'll get it saved properly. Hang around, mate. I do need to speak to you off mic anyway.
Yes.
But tremendous stuff tonight. Really enjoyed this, mate. So until next time, guys, as Don Callis says over at Impact Wrestling, stay safe and stay over.
Spoken, mate.